All right, here we go. Day 13, solving rational equations. I wrote out 3 steps for you to follow. Multiply by the LCD, solve, and then check for extraneous roots. You should be writing those in your notes, which makes fractions undefined. So let's first talk about what makes a fraction undefined. When what? The denominator equals what? 0. Perfect. So now, least common denominator. So we need a least common denominator for all 3 fractions. So I made all of them into a fraction. So what is your LCD? So you're looking at 3, 2, and 1. What is the least common denominator for those? The least common number that all of them will go into. Perfect. 6. Now it says multiply by the LCD. So now you're going to multiply each one by 6 over 1. So each fraction by 6 over 1. So now let's look at the first one. 3 goes in here once, 3 goes in there twice. So now you're going to multiply. What's 2 times y? 2y. And then there's nothing on the bottom, it's just 1. So now looking at the second fraction, 2 goes in there once, 2 goes in there 3 times. So what is 3 times y? 3y. What is 3 times negative 1? Negative 3. Don't forget to multiply through it if there's more than one term. And then on the bottom, 1 times 1 is 1, so it disappears. Now looking over here at negative 3 over 1 times 6 over 1. There's nothing to cancel top to bottom, so we just multiply and get negative 18. And now we're just solving equations like we practiced last week. So 2y plus 3y is 5y. Minus 3 equals negative 18. Now we have to get rid of what? The 3. So add 3 to both sides. You're left with 5y equals negative 15. Divide by 5, y equals negative 3. Now we need to check. Our answer is negative 3. Is it going to make any of these fractions in the original problem undefined, making the denominator 0? No in this case, because there's no y's on the bottom. So we're all set, so that's our answer. Let's try another one. Number 2. All right, now looking at number 2, we're looking for an LCD. So if we make 3 into a fraction, we have an x, a 1, and an x. So what's our LCD? X. Good. So now what are we going to do? Right, multiply each one by x over 1. So we're going to multiply our first fraction by x over 1. We're going to multiply the second one by x over 1. And the last one by x over 1. So now let's look at the first fraction. What can we cancel top to bottom? The x's. Good. So what are we left with? When we cancel, there's 1. So 1 times 2 is 2. And then on the bottom, we just have 1 times 1. So the bottom disappears. Next, is there anything we can cancel top to bottom? No, so we're just going to multiply the x times 3. So we get 3x. Now looking at the last fraction, what can we cancel top to bottom? Right, the x's. So then we have 29 times 1, which is 29. And now we just have an equation to solve. What do we do first? Subtract 2. So now we have 3x equals 27. Divide by 3, and x equals 9. Now looking back for your extraneous roots, if we put x in as 9, would it make any of those fractions in the original equation? So we're looking to make sure it works. So if we put 9 in the bottom, do any of them become undefined fractions? No, so the extraneous root, there is none. Good. Let's go on to question 3. Again, LCD. What is our LCD? We have a 3 and a y. Correct, 3y. So we're going to multiply this one by 3y over 1, and this one by 3y over 1. Now, is there anything in the first one that we can cancel top to bottom? Correct. The 3's can cancel, and it makes a 1. So now we're going to take the y and multiply it through. So y times y is y squared. Y times 4 is 4y. Equals. Now let's do the other side. What cancels top to bottom? The y's. So then 4 times 3 is 12. So multiplying by our least common denominator, we're getting rid of fractions. Now we have a y squared. So it's a quadratic formula. So how are we going to, or quadratic equation, sorry. How are we going to solve this? Right, we have to factor. Well, before we can factor, what does it have to equal? A 0. So how do we do that? What do we have to move? The 12. So if it's a positive 12, we're going to subtract 12 from both sides. So then we have y squared plus 4y minus 12 equals 0. And now we can factor. Two numbers that multiply to give me a negative 12 and add up to 4. All right, so we need two numbers. So what are they going to be? Multiply to give me negative 12, add up to 4. So it's going to be 6 and negative 2. So now we have y plus 6, y minus 2. Now, how do we solve for y? Right, set both of them equal to 0. So we have y plus 6 equals 0, y minus 2 equals 0. Solve for y, you get what? Y equals negative 6, and y equals 2. Now, again, looking at the negative 6, if I plug it in for y up there, would it give us an undefined fraction? No. And then also look at the 2. Would the 2 make an undefined fraction? No. So were they both answers? All right, before we look at number 4. Question 4. Least common denominator again. Every time, least common denominator. So what do we have? We have an x minus 2 and we have an x. So in this case, like yesterday, we need both of them. So we need an x and we need an x minus 2. And we're going to do the same thing. We're still multiplying by our least common denominator to everything. So x minus 2, and then the same thing here. So let's look at the first fraction. What can we cancel top to bottom? Correct, the x minus 2's. So then we have what? Just x times x, which is x squared. Looking at the second one, what can we cancel top to bottom? Correct, the x's. So now you have to be careful, because now you have an x plus 2 times an x minus 2. So in order to do that, you're doing x plus 2 times x minus 2. So you have to do double distribution. So you have x squared times negative 2x. Now you start here, plus 2x, and 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. They cancel, so you have x squared minus 4. Sorry about that line, my smartboard does that. So now what do we have? Plus x squared minus 4 equals. Now, does anything on our last fraction, looking at this one, cancel top to bottom? No. So we have an x in there, and then we have an x minus 2. So now we're going to take the 2x and just multiply through. So we have 2x squared, and then 2x times negative 2, which is a negative 4x. Are there like terms that we can combine? Yes, x squared plus x squared is 2x squared. Minus 4 equals 2x squared minus 4x. So now let's put everything over on one side because we have an x squared, so we need it to equal 0 to begin with. So we're going to subtract, sorry about my smartboard again, 2x squared. So now they both cancel because they give you 0. So you're left with negative 4 over here and a negative 4x. So you're just going to solve for x. Divide by negative 4, and x equals 1. Now, looking back at the top, the original fraction, if I use 1 where x is, so if I put a 1 here or a 1 here, do any of the fractions become undefined? No, so x equals 1 can be our answer. All right, last problem. Least common denominator. Good, it's x plus 3. So now multiply all of them by x plus 3. So x plus 3 over 1, x plus 3 over 1, and x plus 3 over 1. So the first one, is there anything to cancel top to bottom? No. So now you're just going to multiply x through. Make sure you do it to both of them. So x times x is x squared. X times 3 is 3x. Now, looking at the second group, is there anything we can cancel top to bottom? Yes, the x plus 3. So what are we left with? The 15. Now be careful because it's minus 15. So that changes to addition, and that becomes a negative. Then the last part, what can we cancel top to bottom? Right, x plus 3, so we're left with 5x. So now let's get it equal to 0. Subtract 5x, subtract 5x. So now we have x squared minus 2x minus 15. Factor. So I have to multiply to give you negative 15, add up to negative 2. Good. Negative 5 and 3. So it's x minus 5, x plus 3. Set them equal to 0, right, to solve for x. So x equals 5, and x equals negative 3. So now going back up to your original. If I plug in 5 here, does it give me any undefined fractions? No, they give me 8, so they work. If I plug in negative 3 for x, what's negative 3 plus 3? 0. So negative 3 is called the extraneous root. Cannot happen, so you're going to reject it. So your only answer is x equals 5. That's why it's important to check them every time. All right. Now you're going to pause the video and try the following 3. Then you're going to turn back on the video to check your answers. Go ahead.